on to another episode of Discussion Politics. I'm your host Brandon, and I'll be talking about today the morality of the ethics of the Cold War era, in which there was definitely some ethical questions, ethical organizations occurring during that particular time when JFK was president, particularly around 1961, 1962, and eventually 1963, in which many of the government officials have transferred over to a system of governance which mainly focused around foreign policy regarding Cuba and Fidel Castro in that particular country, where Fidel Castro was hoarding prisoners. Of course, we know the communist regime lasted for a long time there, and obviously JFK didn't really enjoy that particular aspect of many of those Cuban, especially regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis, where you had many ships and different Russian organizations gathered around the United States military, and there was a standoff. Around 10 days had passed, and then all of a sudden JFK makes a move and says this is some sort of attack by the Russian government, and that's the reason for the standoff. But it all ended in a peaceful manner based off of that uh, organization of the Russian officials, which used the power of government to facilitate uh, an uh, an end to the process in which many of the United States ships and the aircraft carriers definitely retreated back to their original waters. And after that event, many of the tensions escalated, especially with regarding JFK himself, Cuba, Cold War, and the Russian president at that particular time. And it was such a huge event that many historians think about that event as the catalyst for the assassination of JFK in 1963, November 23rd. I think that's the correct date of when he was assassinated. And the three lone gunmen who were originally thought to be Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby were definitely thought of as not the original assassins. And because of this notion and this idea of the public being unknowable on what actually occurred on that day of the assassination and who actually orchestrated the attack, there was a public uh, interest with the concern of organizing various capacities in which a particular answer of the Cold War era could come to light, and especially with the Cuban government was heavily involved and heavily regulated when it came to searching for the investigations that may lead to some sort of information regarding that event. And the Cold War was at the peak of the height of that movement during that time period in the early 1960s. And when Lyndon Johnson became president, is when everything changed with the civil rights movement. And of course, the civil rights movement begun around 1964, 1965, with Martin Luther King heading that particular movement. And these social movements have been transformed from the day they appeared into um, some sort of political um, blasphemy events, which concocted many of the civil rights and voting rights legislation you see getting passed in the Senate today and the House of Representatives. And there was highly unusual amount of debate with Lyndon B. Johnson, his policies regarding civil rights, and not only civil rights, but voting rights as well. for ending segregation as well. And so there's a correlation between those two ideas of starting from JFK in 1960 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then post the Cuban Missile Crisis, the organization of Soviets against the United States Army. And there was a clash between the two. And Lyndon B. Johnson had to choose between the peace and prosperity versus peace and justice against a nation in which there obviously is a conflict. And so many of the Russian organizations, Russian government officials launched a nuclear proliferation agreement, which attempted to ease the relations between many of the world powers at the particular time, excluding China, because China at the time did not have nuclear power capabilities. It was mainly the United States of America who had the military power, as well as the economic power, as well as the nuclear proliferation and nuclear weapons. And those, I think, are the greatest threats to the Cold War when viewing it from a historical standpoint. And yeah, though in analyzing a Cold War era of politics, that's pretty much what I'd say about the Cold War era of politics. You had JFK starting it out with 1960, when the Bay of Pigs invasion with Cuba, the invasion of Cuba, sending a team of Navy SEALs to Cuba and unleashing an attack, attempting to find Castro, failed miserably. There was a duplicate of Castro, and that was a mission fail, of course. And then obviously before that, you had the timeline of Truman, which the Korean War had begun when the invasion of South Korea from North Korea had occurred. And that was a predicament and a situation Truman handled. So you could say that technically that was the beginning of the Cold War. But then again, there was also another time span before that in 1945 with the Russians developing nuclear weapons and nuclear powers. And that, I think, is the main catalyst. I think many people agree. If you read history and you read different history books, 1945 to I think 1981 is the time span of the Cold War. It's about a 30-year war. And there is many historical precedents to back that up. Plus the introduction of nuclear weapons changed the whole capacity of the military industrial complex. And so just the Cold War begun technically in 1945, but in 1953 is when the Cold War ended, or the Korean War ended. And that's the basic notion, the basic beginning or origination of the Cold War. And then you had obviously Reagan, who dissolved the Soviet Union with Gorbachev, and that changed the course of history as well. But that's all I had to say about the Cold War. I analyzed the main historical events, but for the most part, the Cold War is a piece of history known to many people, but not known to other people. So there you go. If none of you knew this, there's another piece of information. Thank you for watching.